Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Kim. This is Kim Reads and Reviews. This video is going to be a book review video of Maame by Jessica George. This is the first book that I had read this year and I absolutely loved it. Within this one, we follow Maddie. She is 25 years old, still lives at home with her dad. She's his primary caretaker. He has pretty advanced Parkinson's. Her mother is in Ghana, I believe, looking after like an Airbnb, and her brother is in the music industry, just kind of gallivanting around the world. So it's just Maddie looking after her dad. The two of them live together. Maddie's mom ends up returning from Ghana for a period of time, and Maddie's mom tells her to go move out, go live, go experience things, do things. And Maddie jumps at the opportunity. She ends up writing herself a list of things that she thinks represents a well-lived life of a 25-year-old. I think some of them were like smoking a cigarette, experiencing a kiss, a date, go for drinks with work friends. She thinks that if she does these things and achieves these things, she'll have kind of like caught up on things that she's missed out on so far. And it's fairly clear throughout the book that Maddie doesn't view her father as like an inconvenience or anything of that nature. She has a really good relationship with her dad. She really cares for her father quite a bit, but it is a responsibility that she bears, and she knows that it's her responsibility to look after her dad. So she has to, she can't go for drinks with her work friends. She has to go home and give her dad his meds and help, take care of him in the evening. But at no point does she actively think that her dad is a burden by any means. It's never that kind of tone. So we really follow her experience some life first and try and experience some of the things that she has on her list. Some of these things go better than others, and some of these things really don't go well. In some ways, she is quite naive, and this almost reads like it's kind of her coming of age just because she hasn't experienced certain things, or maybe her gut isn't fully developed on when a situation is actually not really good. So she's just kind of tentatively going through a situation being like, something about this doesn't quite feel right, but I can't really pinpoint what it is. So I'm just going to keep going because this is on my list of things to experience. There were a couple of themes within this book that I found to be obviously very profound. One of those things being family dynamics. This was really one that struck an emotional chord with me, I think, a little bit. Obviously, I can't relate necessarily to Maddie's experience, but just the way that it was written and following along with her in her journey, it just tugged on my heartstrings so much. And Maddie herself and what she kind of goes through in this book really tugged on my heartstrings. So like I mentioned, she is the primary caretaker for her father through most of this story until her mom comes to live with him and Maddie moves out. Her mom back in Ghana, her brother pursuing his own interests and the music industry. And they've really kind of taken Maddie for granted in some ways. The fact that she's there with her dad, she's taking the responsibility off of her brother's shoulders, and she's taking the responsibility off of her mom's shoulders to do this thing. They're both kind of living their own life and experiencing things, and Maddie has willingly and happily, in some ways, looking after her dad. But in some ways you do read throughout the story that really her brother and her mom have really taken her for granted and taking this willingness to look after her father because she loves her dad so much. And there's no question in her mind that she would do it, but they do take this for granted. Her relationship with her dad is, yes, she is at times his primary caregiver, but at the same time, it is father-daughter relationship still, and she reflects back on some childhood memories from before he got his diagnosis and before this really started having an effect on him. But the emotional and mental connection she feels with her dad and the way that it was described throughout the story really made me kind of like tear up at times when she's thinking about this responsibility of looking after her dad. It's just implied. She just thinks like, of course I'm going to do this. There's without a question. I oftentimes felt very frustrated on behalf of Maddie towards her mom and her brother because her mom oftentimes was extremely overbearing on Maddie and quite judgmental of her and her life choices. And yet her mom is saying things like, oh, you need to go and live, you need to go and do these things. And Maddie's thinking, well, yeah, I'd like to, but who's going to look after dad? Who's going to take care of him? Nobody can take care of him like I can. And then yet when she's given this opportunity by her mom to move out and go and experience things, you do root for her still. the goodbye she had with her dad when she moved out. Ugh. Clearly, the father-daughter relationship aspect of this really was written in such a way that just like had an emotional grip on my heart. I felt things for Maddie on behalf of her before she even felt them. Like the frustrations I felt for her about her mom and her brother. Eventually, when she feels the same frustrations, you root for them. I rooted for them. I was like, yeah, Maddie, like, give it to them. Like, tell them how it is. Themes of identity are really explored in here. Obviously, Maddie is Ghanaian. Hopefully, I've said that correctly. And yet she's in London and trying to kind of live her life. She goes through a lot of growth in this book, willingly and unwillingly. She experiences things that are part of her list, and she experiences things that were absolutely not part of her list at all. You feel for her, you root for her, going through these experiences the entire time. And as a reader, reading them, I see certain things that she experiences for what they are, but she's still quite young and naive and doesn't quite click for her what's wrong with the situation. Her identity towards her own culture, and also what she thinks her identity is and what should be part of her identity as well. And even grappling with, the nickname that her mom and her brother give her, which is Maame, which means woman in Twi. That also has a lot of impact on Maddie and who she is, and she comes to terms with that name that her brother and mom have given her and how she feels about that, because she's just willingly accepted that as her nickname. When her mom and her brother call her that, she just responds to it right away. And it really does, it's interesting because it means woman, but she's a girl in this story. She starts out as a girl, and eventually by the end, yes, she goes through character development and experiences certain things. And by the end, I think she looks at this nickname nickname that her mom and brother call her a little bit differently. Even as a young Black woman in London and starting work in a professional settings for the first time, she's experiencing certain things like microaggressions. And also the dating scene, she experiences some things very differently because of her skin color, and things don't feel quite right to her, but she can't quite put her finger on it. And she just kind of stumbles along through these things. And there's people out there that take her naivety for granted. And she has two friends in the book. I believe one was a cousin and one was a close friend. And they kind of have experienced similar things or kind of are less naive than she is. And so they kind of hold her hand through explaining certain things. And these were portions that felt a little bit on the nose for me as far as like commentary and explaining to Maddie the microaggressions and the dating experiences that she has. They definitely felt very on the nose, but it almost fit with the story. I oftentimes don't like super on the nose commentary, but this, again, fit with it because Maddie is such a naive character and hasn't experienced certain things or isn't seeing things as they are. Her two friends are there to say, no, this is what it is, and this is why it's wrong. It was good that Maddie had a couple people in her life to show her that the experiences she felt and that gut feeling she felt about this being wrong is right. Like her gut instincts were right. The way that this was written, I loved it, cover to cover. Following along with Maddie's journey, I didn't want to put it down. I was rooting for Maddie. Maddie felt so real to me, the way Jessica George wrote her. She was written in such a way, and the story was written in such a way that had such poignancy. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Where it almost felt as though it was written from a place of actual experience. And I think when you're reading a book, you're like, this feels so intimate and so real that there's no way that this isn't from a lived experience. And I loved this book so much. I read the acknowledgments, and I think that there are parallels in Maddie's own journey with Jessica George's true lived journey. And so because of those parallels, the story just really comes to life, and Maddie's experiences really come to life, and it just put a whole other layer of emotion on the story for me, especially when it came to her relationship with her dad. I'm laughing at myself because I read this 3 months ago now, and I'm still like, I still get a little flustered thinking about how this was written and the story and just how emotional it was to read it and follow along with it. If you read one book this year, let it be Maame. It was excellent. I'm going to read whatever else Jessica George puts out because this was just incredible. It really was. From the writing to the themes to Maddie's character development and character arc and seeing who she is at the end of the story. Just loved the way it ended. Loved everything about it. I would say to just take care of yourself and look up trigger warnings and maybe look at some in-depth reviews about this book, because I'm sure that there are some people out there who have very similar experiences to what this character is going through, and reading it, I just don't want anyone to feel triggered or surprised reading this book. So do look up certain aspects of this beforehand just to take care of yourself. But if you want an emotional journey, feel free and pick it up. It was incredible. I really loved it. I definitely had a book hangover after reading this. There was nothing that compared to it for probably 2 months after reading this. Go read this. Go run to your nearest bookstore. I'm just kidding. Or rent it from your library. Maybe start there. Use your local library. Get this book. Read it. Cry. If you did cry, come back to this video and comment that you cried reading it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I think that I've covered pretty well everything that I want to mention about this book. I'm sure as soon as I hit stop recording, I'm going to think of a handful of other things that I should have and could have mentioned about this book. But thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, feel free to like and subscribe. I do hope you're enjoying what you're reading as much as I enjoyed reading Maame, and I will see you in the next video.